Let me assure you, if you are seeking her, she is seeking you. That's just the way it works. If you have a sense that Goddess may be calling you, you are right. She's longing for you to come to her, like a mother reaching out her hands to a toddler, encouraging it to take its first steps. Goddess has her arms raised to you and wants you to come near, come closer. Fall into her arms so that she can tell you how beautiful you are, and also so that she can tear you apart and remake you into even more of yourself. Welcome to the Rooted in Light podcast. I'm Tuesday Rivera, your host, and today I'm going to do a solo podcast. So, to tell you a little bit about my story, and this feels like it really follows well from our last podcast where I had two wonderful guests on, Dalit Aroha and Katie Milani, talking about their own journey to Goddess. And since that podcast, I have gotten great feedback about it. Like people actually really wanting to know more about these personal journeys to Goddess, but people asking me specifically about my journey to Goddess and what that looked like. And so I'm going to just spend a little time today sharing a little bit about my own journey and what it has looked like early and now. And hopefully that will be kind of like a breadcrumb trail to your own journey. That's at least what I'm hoping. I started off reading a piece that I wrote several years ago about how when Goddess calls, what might it feel like? How might she come to you? What should you be looking for? And I started it off because I feel so clearly, that Rumi quote, what you are seeking is also seeking you. I have found that to be true with Goddess. The moment you begin to say, oh, maybe I want a relationship, she's like, yes, let's do this. And so, that is one of the things I actually don't doubt. I think in devotion and in faith practices, there's lots of room for doubt. And I will share my own experiences of doubt with you today. But that always seems really clear. It feels almost like a truism with a capital T. If you are seeking her, she is seeking you. And so if you begin to kind of reach out to her, she's going to reach back and you'll begin to have experiences. That to me feels like it's true all of the time. So to say a little bit about my own journey toward Goddess, I should say I am not a person. I was raised Catholic. Went to church through confirmation. My mother was really clear that I should get confirmed. And so kind of after I got confirmed, we stopped going to church. Now, in hindsight, my mom made that decision for really good reasons, but I didn't know then. For me, it felt like a formality. You're Catholic, you get confirmed. And then, so we were kind of cultural Catholics, not as much kind of true believers, I think, in some ways. But I do have that background of ritual, of collective prayer, of those kind of things. But I never felt especially drawn to the divine. I'm not a person, I feel amazed when I hear people say that they started seeking or they started meditating in their 20s or, they went to school for comparative religion or theology. I did not seem to, that was not a curiosity that was particularly alive in me. Until I got into my 40s. And so that's the other thing to say. I like to say, I wasn't kind of raised with a spiritual bent. That hasn't been something I've sought all of my life. But in my 40s, I found myself at a crossroad that a lot of people come to in their 40s, which is do I want something different for my life? Do I want my life to continue in the way it's continuing? Or do I want something different in my life? And I did a fairly traditional, kind of did the thing. I went to college and got married and had two children and built a business and was kind of pursuing those things that I thought would make a happy life. And there was a lot of happiness in that life. I don't want to say that there wasn't. There was a lot of happiness in that life. But in my early 40s, I really started to wonder if there wasn't something more, something deeper, something that was a life that felt more kind of mine. um, and so I just began to seek. I mean, I think even in my mid 30s, I started meditating. I had a running practice. I was always a person who's going out and being really physical. But it wasn't until my early 40s that I opened to kind of more ceremonial work. And so at some point, I had my first sacred ceremony. So this is a place where the idea was actually to explore the sacred, to explore love, to explore myself. But I will tell you, I had no intent to develop a goddess practice or meet a goddess, or I didn't know what that meant. I actually thought this ceremony was going to kind of like help me love myself more and kind of get clear of any blocks to kind of my own love. And so it was pretty surprising when during that ceremony, Goddess came to me and introduced herself, and not with words. She wasn't like, I am Goddess. Here I am, Tuesday for you. So I want to be really clear because sometimes we want that to be what happens. But actually what happened is she came out of a night sky and gave me a message, certainly about loving myself, but about what I would call my true nature and all of our true natures, which is of love. And so she gave me some really clear verbal messages, right? So just like phrases, lessons, learnings. And I thought that was pretty amazing. And then every day for about a month after that, she would come to me at some point in the day and kind of give me a feeling of love or give me a message. And I really didn't understand that that wasn't completely normal. I thought you go through this ceremony, you have this experience, you meet Goddess, it's amazing, and she comes to you then from then on. And apparently that is not so typical, but it might be for you. But what it lit up in me was a real desire to explore. What is this divine feminine? These messages I knew were very real, made me feel very tender, made me feel like I could come closer to myself. They didn't invite me out of myself to go worship something. They made me go inward and think about how I could love myself. So I started to explore what that meant. I started to read books. I started to pray. I started to kind of like, it was almost like my antenna was up. What is happening here? And I pretty soon got connected with Sally Kempton, who became my teacher, who wrote a book called Awakening Shakti, who had a long-term practice with Goddess and a deep understanding of the tantric tradition and goddesses of that lineage. And so I got connected with Sally right away and started kind of understanding more what had happened to me. But I want to go back before that because that was kind of like, oh, Goddess, oh, the divine feminine. It was kind of like that was a revelation. But I want to go back a little bit before that because I actually had a relationship with the divine feminine, had a relationship with the sacred inside of me, which is a way that Goddess shows up far longer than this ceremony I was in my 40s. I like to, like my first story about getting connected with the Goddesses. I was 3 or 4. Some of you may have heard this, so I won't take too long on it, but I was 3 or 4. And I was sitting on kind of this back concrete slab we had in the back of our apartment. And I was sitting down and I looked over and there's this big black spider. And I thought to myself, that spider's going to come bite me. And sure enough, the spider like came over, sat on top of my foot, bit my foot, and then walked away. And it was a big spider. And in fact, I actually still have the scar on my foot. It looks a little bit like a cigarette burn so it's a round, big scar on my foot. And I ran inside and I said, Mama, a spider bit me, a spider bit me. And, my mom didn't know what to make of it. And didn't not believe me, but sort of didn't believe me. But it was interesting because how I remembered that my whole life was I looked over at the spider and I knew it was coming to bite me. And I wasn't upset that it did. And I just knew it and it went on. Well, as soon as I started working with Sally, like one of the first metaphors she used for goddess was the goddess is a spider who spins her web and lives in it. And it just began to be like, oh my goodness. Oh, even at an early age, I'd had um, an interaction and engagement with goddess. Now, that's, like some people would say like, okay, you're just making a story of that. Fine, great. It doesn't have to mean anything. It does to me. It feels pretty clear to me that it was a way of kind of marking me for a future path. But throughout my childhood, I really had a lot of experience of an inner caretaker, an inner voice, directing me, helping me, giving me information that it didn't seem like I was able to get elsewise, or intuitions or assumptions, right? That I've come to understand is part of goddess being alive in me. So even in, even in the worst parts of my childhood, I have now been able to understand that there was an accompaniment from goddess, not a saving, not a making sure nothing bad happened, but an actual accompaniment. And so I've had a long-term relationship with an inner guide that I now also understand to be divine and to be of the divine feminine. And I went into work right away with my first job was like working with domestic violence survivors. I have always had a deep affinity for women and with women, and really liked that work, really understood the strength of women, really understood the toughness, the love, the joy, the tenderness. Like all of that has always been a part of my life. And now that I have a goddess lens, I can see that I've always really felt connected to that divine feminine, right? And I would not have used those words in my 20s as I was working with women and helping them get to the hospital or get to an attorney's office or keep themselves safe. But kind of it's almost like after that ceremony, the scales were off my eyes and I was like, oh, this all makes some sense. This all makes some sense. And so I started working with Sally and taking her classes and reading her book and doing practices, a lot of practices of visualization, a lot of practices of prayer, practices of chanting. And the voice of goddess has just become stronger and stronger in my life. And so when I think about goddess, I think about a little girl who thought she was alone but wasn't, right? That goddess is always there. I think about being guided toward work that served women and served her without kind of having a conscious understanding of it. I also think about having a love in my life. And I actually mean a romantic love at this point. I certainly have love of goddess, but I mean having a romantic love in my life that I would not have had I not turned toward her. So once I had a sense of her, and I said to you, it was in my early 40s, and I was kind of looking around and saying, is this what I want with my life? I was in a long-term marriage that was good, but not great, and was certainly not what I needed to kind of continue to grow, to continue to move into a relationship with goddess. And so as I continued in a relationship with her, and this is where I always get a little, I think I either scare people or I inspire people, and maybe it will be neither for you, or it might just be, you might just be like, what is she talking about? But at some point, as I came more into relationship with goddess, as I was questioning what was mine to do in the world, was this the right relationship for me? Was I, could I possibly end a 20-year marriage where I had 2 children? Goddess again actually came to me quite directly. So you remember in that first ceremony, I said she came to me pretty directly, gave me some messages, some strong verbal messages, some strong visual images. The second time that she came to me as clearly, and keep in mind I'd been praying and working, but the second time she came to me as clearly, it was in a message about my marriage. And what she said, and it was the goddess Kali, who I had no relationship with at that point. I did not even know who she was. So that can happen. I don't know if last week or last podcast, Dalida talked about goddess Oshun showed up for her, and Dalida had no idea who that was. This was the same for me. the goddess Kali came to me. I had no idea who she was. And she looked at me and she said, you cannot be who you're going to become and stay married to the man that you're married to. And I remember trying to understand kind of who and what she was. And I remember saying, oh, her skin was dark. It was a blue-black, and she was completely pitiless. It wasn't like, oh, honey, you can't stay married. She actually didn't say I had to leave. She just said, you can't be who you're meant to become if you stay married. So I had a choice, right? It wasn't her saying, leave your marriage. It was a choice. Do you want to be who you're supposed to become? Then you have to not be in this marriage. And that was the permission I actually needed to leave. I think I'd wanted to leave. I know I'd wanted to leave for quite some time. But her coming to me, and then it was like, and who is this that said this to me? My experience when goddess comes is there is no question. It's not like, was that goddess? Was it not? Like, she comes and it's really, really clear. Now, afterwards, you might get a little confused. Oh my gosh, how can I leave my marriage? What can I do? But when she comes, it's really clear. So I was just like, I talked to, again, someone who was like blue-black. She had this long tongue, and and apparently I've got a thumbs up will come on the screen. Those of you who are watching on YouTube, a thumbs up just appeared as I was gesturing. So, and so it was like, that's Kali. Okay. So then I began to learn more about her. So for me, the goddess practice, the goddess devotion has been very organic. Like, just see the next step. Okay. Goddess came to me. Let me find out more about goddess in general. Okay, this particular goddess came to me. Let me find out more about that particular goddess. And so it's been, again, just a step by step. I didn't set out to go like, oh, I believe in goddess and I'm going to make goddess devotion the center of my life. That has been not how I have imagined it. It has been a bit of a cycle of like seeking, but not necessarily seeking a divine figure. I have experienced it as seeking myself, seeking to become more of who I am and who I'm meant to be in the world, and then finding or being held by or being accompanied by or being encouraged by and lifted by the divine feminine. And then a little bit of doubt. What does this mean? Who am I to feel this way? Who am I to talk about this? Who am I to think a goddess is visiting me? Who am I to explore a tantric lineage? I am a Black American. I don't, in any of my understanding of my lineage, have any Hindu practicing folks. I don't have any links to those lands. And the goddesses who come to me come from that tradition and lineage. And so there's been a little bit of a question for me. It's like, how do I make sense of this? What does that mean that they're just coming? Well, goddesses are energies and archetypes, right? So there's a lot of similarity across the different pantheons of goddesses. But the truth is, I'm just not going to be arrogant enough to question. Like, this is how she's come to me. This is how it's going to be. And so I just continued with my devotion very quietly, just to say, like, really quietly, working with my teacher, doing my own work. And then I had a spontaneous initiation into our particular goddess. So when I say a spontaneous initiation, I mean, I wasn't seeking to be initiated. It was kind of out of the blue. I experienced a kind of a physical manifestation of a goddess. And I knew right away which goddess it was. And so because of the energy of it, and I sent a panicked email to my teacher, Sally, and I said, this thing happened. I don't know what it means. It's a little weird. Can you help me out? And she was like, absolutely. here's what happened. I'm going to tell you, this is how this goddess comes to you. So she had a map. And so that was really important to me. I had a teacher who had a map. This is what it can look like. And this is what I offer to people in my coaching or in my workshops, a little bit of a map, a little bit of like, hey, here's how it can happen. Not in any way that this is the way it will happen for you. And she comes to each of us very personally. So for me, for example, the energy that she has come in on, the goddess that she has come in on, goddesses have different energies. We have goddesses who are, their energies of love and abundance. That can be things like Lakshmi, or Aphrodite, or you might have motherly love, Mother Mary, or you might have fierce goddesses, Durga, Kali, those that are coming, Hecate, Morgan, like those who are coming in with a sword. Like goddesses have different signatures, right? Different energies. In my understanding of goddess, she is one and she has 1,000 faces. So the face she came into me with was the face of Eros, that erotic energy. And of course, that is a sexual energy, but it's also a sensual, playful energy. And so that's how the initiation I had was a spontaneous kind of sensual, sexual occurrence. And that was a little distressing, if I'm honest. I wasn't really waiting for it, but I knew what goddess it was because the first time I read her name in a book, I got scared. I was like, oh, no, thank you. No, thank you. That's all right. And in some ways, they'll say sometimes when you read a goddess's name, if she's calling your name, you might actually feel frightened. You might feel great. My first experience with the goddess was like loving and beautiful and gentle and gorgeous. And then when Kali came to me and was like fierce, I was like, I gotcha. I love fierce women. I'm down for fierce. But when this goddess came to me in a more erotic way, it was a little scary. I became a little undone. I wasn't sure what to do with it. Since then, I am certainly have felt my way into it and have tried to really honor that. Really honor that the goddess that I'm devoted to, Lalita, is a goddess of the erotic and of Eros, and whatever that might mean in different days. And so, what might I say about my way of knowing her? Because what I want to say, I share this story not so you begin to look for your own, not so you begin to look for the way she shows up to me, but that to kind of like raise your antenna for how she might show up to you. She shows up to me often very, very visually. So when I work with people, I do a lot of guided visualizations, right? She comes to me in personified ways. She shows me images. And I have not historically been a very visual person, but that is how she comes to me. So maybe she'll come to you very visually. Maybe she could come to you by messages that are more auditory, or you might see words. She might come to you as a sensation. We laugh. I always say she has to come to me really clearly, just because I'm like a practical Tory. I know. I can't believe I'm saying this at the end of 30 minutes of talking about goddess. Maybe some of you are saying practical, but I do tend to be like a really grounded, practical person. Like that's what I value. And so I sometimes say she has to come to me and like hit me upside the head, or I'm going to just miss it. And I'd be like, oh, I don't know. But my partner, who has had a devotion, my current partner, which I'm not sure if I finished that story, but my current partner who has a goddess devotion and has had a goddess devotion for 3 times as long as I have, she doesn't come to him in that way. She comes to him much softer, impressions, less words. And so when I say, I'm just going to go back to that partner bit. When I say that I was a little girl who was accompanied and didn't know it, and I'm a woman who is in love in ways I could never have understood, it is directly because that sword cut that she made that brought me out of my marriage of 21 years, and then eventually made me available for a different kind of love, a kind of love where my partner also is a devotee of Goddess, who also has an experience of the sacred in his everyday life that I can talk to and work with and connect my own divine feminine energy. You all have heard him. He's been on this podcast. It's Tuesday Rivera. He's been on twice. He'll be on again. We'll talk about Eros. But I very much kind of see my life in those ways. A little girl who was accompanied and didn't know it, a woman who found love she didn't know was possible, both inside myself and with a partner. And then now, a person who is in some ways leading others to their own relationship with Goddess through my own devotion, not because I think I know it all or understand it all, but I actually feel like it's mine to do. I think I have been gifted by the goddesses that I am devoted to, and specifically the goddess that I'm initiated in. And part of what I bring is an understanding that if you call her, she will come. And so I use my own self as a breadcrumb trail to Goddess, but I actually directly link people with the goddesses that are calling to them, not because I'm so special, but because I have a relationship and I can help other people have a relationship. It's taken a long time for me to say that for quite some time. I'm 50 now, quite some time. My goddess practice was just for me. It was very internal, and it was not something I talked about with anyone who wasn't close to me. But now I'm kind of like, it's time. Like, it's time. It's time. You know, and like, if you're down, come be down. Let's do this thing. If it's not interesting to you, that's cool. Just go do something else. Like, I don't need to convince anyone, but I do know there are so many of us who want a relationship with the sacred. Sometimes that looks like the sacred inside ourselves. Sometimes it looks like the sacred in nature. Sometimes it looks like very specific kind of personifications, different goddesses from different traditions. And that's what I'm interested in fostering in the world. That's what I have been invited to do, is to help you and to help others develop a deeper relationship with the sacred. And so I'm very, very glad to do that. That doesn't mean it's without doubt. I think doubt is part of devotion. I think that doubt helps you not get too kind of high and ego-driven about some of these things. I think doubt is only real. Doubt is only, it just makes sense to have some doubt. And so that's also, I work with doubt in my own self, and I work with doubt with other folks. I think it's part of coming in to Goddess. I think it's a patriarchal notion that we would never doubt, that we would just believe. I think that the relationship with Goddess allows us to have doubt, allows us to have questions, allows us to wonder and ask, and allows us to become more of ourselves, whatever that path is. And that's certainly what I've experienced in my own path with Goddess. And I would say, you know, I mentioned that I have relationships with several goddesses. That is true. I have, of course, kind of my main goddess who I was initiated with. But it's not, if Goddess has 1,000 faces, she's going to welcome you to all of them. We don't have to kind of like lock it down on one. So it's really fun for me. It's really fun for me to help people figure out like what goddesses they might connect to, what it might look like, what their practice looks like for them. I mean, you heard Katie and Dalit at our last podcast. Their practices are way different. They're way different from each other. And they're actually practices that are way different from me. I think a question I ask them is like, what are the practices that work for them? And what are the practices they're like, no, thank you. Well, and I don't remember if I said this, but like for me, meditation is a practice, and it's a big one to kind of connect with Goddess. Is not one that particularly works for me, or not one that I follow. I sing, I chant, I do mantras, I dance, I go to nature, I do visualizations, I pray. But meditation, even though that's one of my teacher's biggest things, not as much mine. So you get to build your own path. And so I guess what I would say is, yeah, welcome to it. If you are seeking Goddess, she is seeking you. at the beginning, at the top of the podcast, I read a little bit from something I wrote called When Goddess Calls. We'll make that available in the show notes. It kind of goes more deeply into what do you do if you think you're hearing her call or you want to hear her call? What are some places to start? What do you do about doubt? So we'll make that available for you. And of course, you can always reach out to me directly and talk about Goddess. That's like my favorite thing in the world to do. But wishing you well in it. I think I like to end with a practice. And so I think the practice, it's just going to be a fun practice today. It's not going to be anything all that deep. If you feel intrigued about Goddess and you want to know more, I mean, there are a ton of resources out there, but I'm going to challenge you to go take a What Goddess Am I quiz. Yep, just online, go find 3 or 4. You can do what African goddess or what Yoruban goddess am I, what Hindu goddess am I, what Incan goddess, what Celtic goddess, but you can use your own lineage, you can use others, but a fun way to start that doesn't have to be like so serious and so devotional and like, oh, I'm going to just have a goddess practice, is take a little quiz, see what the results are, and maybe look up that goddess and see if there's any resonance for you. Super easy, super casual, doesn't commit you to anything, but might be a fun way to start. And of course, if you want to dive in more deeply, connect with me, please reach out. I'm available. Tuesday at TuesdayRivera.com. We've got a podcast. I think we've got hello at TuesdayRivera.com, but you can just reach out directly to Tuesday at TuesdayRivera.com. Thank you so much. I hope this was interesting for you. Let me know your questions. This episode was a direct result of people saying, we want to hear your story. So if you want to hear things on the podcast, let us know. Rate, review, share with people. If this podcast episode speaks to you, share it with someone directly. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Take good care.